Having already selected my top 10 best train stations in Melbourne, it's only fair to find the top 10 worst ones too. This is undoubtedly a tough list to make. Everyone has that train station that they love to hate, and I'm sure some of you will be disappointed that your candidate station has missed out on being shamed in this video. Just as in the previous top 10, I do not have a formal criteria for deciding the worst train stations, but some contributing factors include aesthetic, perception of safety, and user experience. Let's get into it. Coming in at number 10 is Roxburgh Park, the penultimate station on the Craigieburn line. Roxburgh Park is a relatively new station, having opened as an infill station in 2007 when the Broadmeadows Metropolitan line was extended to Craigieburn, although a station called Somerton existed nearby until 1960. Roxburgh Park makes this list because I believe it is disappointingly tacky and cheaply built. The island platform is dominated by this behemoth of a ramp, which looks like it was put in as an afterthought when the government decided that it didn't want to pay for a lift. The station is actually impressively sheltered from above, but it can be pretty windswept at times, as there is not a lot around. It also doesn't feel particularly safe, both because of the soulless industrial nature of the east of the station, with its seldom used freight sidings, some of which are currently being ripped up, and the dodgy nature of the suburb that it serves. The ninth worst station in Melbourne is Lalor on the Mernda line. You might have also heard it pronounced Lawler or Laylor, but I'm going to pronounce it Lalor, so you're going to have to deal with it. It's a struggle to find any shelter on this platform whatsoever. It's a bit of an asphalt wasteland, not exactly the sort of station you'd want to get off at, having already spent a long time on the train all the way out from the city. While its extensive car parks are functional, they're certainly not sightly. The one thing Lalor has got going for it is an interesting history from a rail perspective. It was once a terminus after the line beyond it to Whittlesea closed in 1959. When the train line was reinstated to Epping, it served as a passing loop, so trains could negotiate the single-track sections on either side. Despite the nearby stations of Epping and Thomastown getting upgraded with the duplication works, Lalor missed out, and has only recently benefited from a minor upgrade in the form of resurfacing. At number 8 on the list is Batman on the Upfield line. If I were to describe Batman in 2 words, I would choose bare minimum. The station is extremely basic, with hardly any shelter and a single exit out onto a level crossing. There is so little shelter at this station, you've basically only got one carriage going either way that you can board to avoid getting absolutely drenched if there's heavy rain. It is also accompanied with graffiti-lined walls, although there are at least a couple of entertaining pieces. The station's namesake was also an awful colonist. Described by the famous Australian artist John Glover as the vilest man I have ever known, John Batman participated in massacres of Aboriginal people in Tasmania, among other morally reprehensible actions. It's fitting then that he has a very ugly station named after him. But I think it would probably be more appropriate to rename the station and give it an upgrade. At number 7 is one of the more notoriously bad stations. Broadmeadows on the Craigieburn line has quite a bad reputation, and as far as the station's concerned, rightfully so. It is extremely ugly, with its distinctive drab grey building. It's also a frustrating station to navigate from a user's perspective. If you want to get to Platform 1 from the shopping centre, you would think that this pedestrian overpass would lead you there, but all it does is dump you on Platform 2 after this roundabout route, requiring you to skirt underneath this very dodgy underpass to Platform 1. It's hard to even find the underpass, particularly if you're one of the many tourists hopping off the 901 bus from the airport and trying to trundle your huge bags around the place. It's not the nicest first impression of the city. To its credit though, it is a well-used station with plenty of bus connections. Coming in at number 6 is South Kensington Station on the Werribee line. South Kensington provides a horrid user experience. There is nothing like navigating through an unsafe feeling, flood-prone underpass, and then walking up a long ramp onto platforms that are so narrow that it is a genuine struggle to avoid standing behind the yellow line. Have a look at how narrow this is. It's almost physically impossible for me to walk without being on the tactiling that forms part of the yellow line. So it's almost impossible for you to walk up without at some point crossing the yellow line, especially if there are people sitting down on these benches. That's not to mention the extreme lack of shelter. It's no wonder that trains love to avoid stopping here. It's perhaps not as bad if you're a train nerd like me, as you see all sorts of trains whizzing past, but for normal people, yeah, it's not the nicest station. Despite the Metro Tunnel dive site being directly adjacent to this station, South Kensington has somehow missed out on a substantial upgrade, only having a few minor improvements done to the entrance. At number 5 on the list is the station that I feel the most unsafe at. Unfortunately, the area has long been somewhat of an epicentre for Melbourne's drug problems, and it is quite common to find used needles and other drug-related litter at the station. This station is of course North Richmond on the Mernda and Hurstbridge lines. The station is plain and ugly in its own right, with these untasteful ramps leading you up to it. It's a shame because underneath the station is quite a vibrant shopping strip. The station should be praised for being well connected to tram routes 12 and 109 as well. Some of you may have used them before to get out to IKEA. But ultimately, it's a station where you often hold your breath and hope that no unruly passengers get on. It was difficult to set the order of these bottom 4 stations. All could be deserving of the number 1 spot. Luckily for Albion, it somehow managed to escape with only being at number 4. Albion ticks all the boxes for what you wouldn't want in a station. It has itself a dodgy underpass, a near complete absence of shelter, and abandoned infrastructure. It was promised an upgrade as part of the airport line, which will see an enormous train overpass built more or less on top of it, but relying on the airport line isn't exactly the best way to give yourself a chance of being upgraded. As of the time of filming, the airport line seems to have federal and state funding, but there is a big dispute over how they will build the station at the airport, which might delay or even derail the project. So I wouldn't hold your breath if you're waiting for action at Albion. At number 3 is Cannonook, the Frankston Line's penultimate station. Cannonook features a largely unsheltered island platform, served by this single dirty ramp. It is surrounded by soulless main roads. It's a place where you might well feel trapped, as you must not only traverse this narrow overpass over the freeway to reach it from the eastern side, but even the station itself is hemmed in by this access track to the nearby maintenance facility. If you feel unsafe at Cannonook, your instincts are warranted. It was actually the site of the disappearance and probable murder of a woman in 1990. That is, of course, on top of the Frankston Line's existing reputation for interesting characters. At number 2, on the Belgrave line, is Boronia. It is truly the ugly duckling of train stations. Rebuilt before level crossing removals were trendy, and unlike the more tasteful trench stations of today, this trench is more aptly described as a hellhole. It even has this laughable station sign, just to make sure that you remember that you're at this horrible station. This bus interchange really has a strong piss smell. It's worse than Essendon. It was promised an upgrade at the last state election, which should be delivered in 2026 and include new public open space by putting a deck over some of the trench. Hopefully that will be enough to improve the station. It's just a shame that they didn't get it right the first time with the trench. But without further ado, the worst station in Melbourne is Jacana. It is the 3rd entry from the Craigieburn line. It's a consensus pick. Jacana was the first pick in Reddit's train station elimination game, and deservedly so. Where do we even start? The platforms at Jacana have hardly any shelter, and uncomfortable seats. It even used to have these garden beds which, until their removal, used to only sustain litter. To escape this station, you have to use this ridiculous roller coaster of an overpass with a few token chunks of corrugated iron which fail to repel any sort of rain. Then you take a blind turn into perhaps Melbourne's dodgiest pedestrian underpass to duck under Pascoval Road. One night I unfortunately found myself at this station using the underpass and the lights actually stopped working. Despite the 542 bus running by here, there isn't an easy bus connection and there isn't much at all in the way of car parking. I think they should utilise this park here to create some sort of bus interchange in a small car park. But if all that wasn't enough, you have these unsightly power lines running above, and of course a constant noise and air pollution at Pascoval Road and the Western Ring Road. There is no doubt that it was a challenging assignment for the engineers to fit a station among a road interchange and a freight overpass, and while the design is functional, it is certainly not pleasant. But we can find good aspects to even the worst of things. Jakarta does have a nice view of the sunset. Reflecting on the stations that featured, we see that most of them are located in the outer suburbs and in low socioeconomic areas. If governments did more to help people in financial difficulty, I'm sure you would see an improvement in perceived safety at these stations. Another common thread through these stations was the lack of shelter, and I think this is something that really needs addressing throughout the network. Even recently rebuilt stations lack shelter. Public transport needs to be user-friendly and reliable in all situations, and given Melbourne's capricious weather, there really needs to be better protection from rain and wind. It wouldn't be expensive to rectify either, especially relative to the cost of other flagship infrastructure projects right now. But even if these stations are bad to use, I don't necessarily think that upgrading them is the most pressing need for the public transport network. For example, if train lines had more frequent trains, we wouldn't care as much about bad stations because we wouldn't have to spend as much time waiting at them. So there we have it, Melbourne's worst 10 train stations. Thank you for watching this video, and thank you especially to my 1,000 subscribers. This video was partially made to celebrate that milestone. Please let me know what stations you think missed out on this list in the comments. Until next time.